Welcome in the third video on John Keats' Ode to Autumn. In this video, I am analyzing and explaining you the whole poem of Ode to Autumn. In the previous videos, I have given you a brief introduction of John Keats and the background of the poem Ode to Autumn. I am Dr. Vinita Bhadoria, Associate Professor of English, Government College, Behror. This video belongs to Paper 1 Poetry and Drama of English Literature, and this is useful for the students of BA Part 2. Ode to Autumn. Ode to Autumn is one of Keats' most sensual, image-laden poems. It is sumptuous description of the season of autumn in a three-stanza structure, each of 11 lines and of an ABAB rhyme scheme. The first stanza deals primarily with the atmosphere of autumn, while the second addresses autumn in the style of a female goddess, with a trace of homemaker about her. And the third stanza goes back to the beauty of autumn, advising her not to mourn the loss of springtime, for there is ample life in autumn. First, I recite poem for you, then give some important meanings, difficult meanings, and later on I'll explain and analyze the stanza for you. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit and wines that round the thatched eaves run. Mellow ripe, ripen, fully ripen, पका हुआ, fruitfulness of fruits. Fruitfulness is the example of abstract for concrete. Close bosom friend, intimate and beloved friend. Maturing, bringing maturity or ripening. Conspiring, planning. Load burden with fruit, full of fruits. The trees full of fruits. Vines, creeper plants of grapes. Thatch eaves projecting edge of the straw-covered roofs of cottage run. So, in these lines, the poet is picturizing the sight of ripening fruits during the autumn season. The poem gives a vivid description of an English autumn with all the warmth and richness of the season, and it breathes a spirit of happy contentment. In no other poem does the poet's simple and direct love of nature find a better and fuller expression. It is the season when atmosphere is misty and the fruits get ripened. The bright sun has been called its intimate friend, as the heat of the sun is very much required for the ripening of the fruits. The vines, which are spreading along the projected portions of the straw roofs, get loaded with grapes in the autumn season, and the grapes get ripened and juicy with the heat of the sun. In this way, autumn and sun work in cooperation. Keats has always been considered as the poem of the senses. But in this is his final work, it is all the more clear why this attribute is so strongly tied to him. This first stanza is a celebration of autumn. Note the gorgeous long voweled imagery that accompanies the writing. The reference to abundance, although autumn has been taken in much of British literature as the start of death, as a melancholy time, Keats has taken it here as a fruitful period of existence. There is strong evidence of energy and beauty in the poem. To bend with apples and moss cottage tree. To bend with apple the moss cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd, and plump the hazel shells, with a sweet kernel to set budding more, and still more later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clumsy shell. Few meanings. To the core, fully, completely. To swell, make larger. Gourd, gourd is the fleshy fruit like cucumber, pumpkin. Plump, fat. Kernel, softer eatable part within the shell. Budding, cause to bud and bloom. Clammy, moist and sticky. Sticky is chipchipa. Seize and overbrimmed, fill up and cease to overflow. So, in these lines, poet says that the autumn is the season of mist which are formed as the water is drawn up from the earth by the strong heat of the sun. It is the time when the fruits ripens to their very core. The bright sun shines clearly in the sky and all the fruit, apples, grapes, dates are ripened to the full. There is plentiful crop of fruits and vegetables. The vines are covered with grapes and the moss covered trees of the cottage garden bend with the weight of the apples which have ripened to their core in the friendship of the sun, with the help of the sun. The season of autumn in the company of its friend, the sun combines to develop the ground and makes the hazelnut grow sweet kernel within their shells and appear plump. The flower continue till the late season in autumn blossom abundantly. Bees suck up their pollen and go on collecting honey from these flowers into their sticky hives. Clammy. Clammy is sticky. There is such a rich harvest of flowers in autumn and so wide is the opportunity for bees to collect honey that they feel that summer season will continue forever. Already their hives are overfilled with honey and there is no space where they can keep their honey, so rich is the harvest that autumn provides to them. It is the ripeness in plenty which is described in this stanza, and the atmosphere that is created in the first stanza is ultimately one of the peacefulness. That is not to say that there is not an undercurrent of misery running through the poem. The idea of being full of ripeness to the core produces the parallel imagery of a climax. This is the ultimate glory of autumn, the last hurrah before the freezing grip of winter. The flow of sibilant sounds creates an easy flowing rhythm. However, the students does get the sense that Keats is building up something grand. Keats was never considered one of the highbrow poets and, in fact, was criticized for his adherence to simple language. That poetry did not need to complicate it to be worth. It is the belief of Keats. Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twinned flowers, and sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy leaden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look thou watchest the last oozing hours by hours. Amidst, amidst between granary store, threshed corn. Winnowing. Winnowing is separating the chaff from the grain. Furrow. Cornfield. Drowsed. Moved to feel sleepy. Fume. Fragrance. Adore. Spears. Leaves uncut. Twinned. Entangled with corn. Gleaner. Gatherer of corn ears left by the reapers. Laden, loaded with gleanings. Brook, a small stream. Cider, press which crushes apple to give apple wine. Cider is apple wine. Hours by hours, for hours together, continuously. In this stanza, autumn is personified. In the style of the Greeks, four pictures of autumn are presented by the poet. Autumn is seen like a farmer sitting on the granary floor with his hair waving in the winnowing air. The farmer, autumn is sitting carefree without any worry in his mind. Autumn is also seen in the form of a reaper who has been lulled to sleep by the fumes of poppies near his half reaped furrow. The reaper is seen holding in his hand the reaping hook and leaping a line of corn only a half mown, and the tender flowers encircling them still left unharmed. Autumn is seen further in the form of a reaper with sheaves balancing the corn on his head. And again, autumn can be seen in the form of a farmer sitting near the cider press and watching the juice of apple coming out of the press for hours and hours without any break. The feeling of freedom in this poem goes on well into the second stanza, into this stanza which I am describing you. But here Keats leans in closer. He doesn't want He does not view autumn still from a wider perspective. But as I told you, it is the whole stanza is totally personified. So he personifies the season itself to make it easier for the students to empathize with the season that he is so painstakingly bringing to life. In this stanza, autumn is viewed as a fertile female goddess. However, like the fairy child in La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, there remains a hint of cruelty to autumn. Beautiful women with an age of cruelty to them is hardly something staggering, As it is one of the ideas that is brought up quite strongly in his poetry, it could be because Keats himself was unlucky in love and so drew on his experience to draft the women in his poems. Here it is the word hook, that provides much of the idea that Autumn is a cruel and kind woman. Although hook is a harsh implement, a sound of war, the very next line is spares the next swath and all its twin flowers, implying a sense of fairness and kindness. On one side, cruelty, and the other side, fairness and kindness of woman. The use of the phrase oozing also implies a certain level of cruelty. There is a sinister, drawn out sound to the word, which makes it seem far more threatening than the previous few lines. The poet describes the rich beauty of autumn. Usually, this season is pictured as dull and melancholy. It is considered as the season of death and decay. But Keats finds pleasure and beauty in autumn. And the poet giving description to the familiar scenes which may be seen in the countryside during autumn. For this purpose, the poet personifies the whole season autumn in many ways that I have discussed just now, like a farmer, like a female goddess, like a woman, like a gleaner, like a reaper. So many personification. The whole stanza is full of personifications. Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too. While bared clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the stubble panes with rosy hue. Then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river shallows borne aloft, or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, and full grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne. Hare's cricket sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. This is the concluding stanza of the poem and few meanings. Where are the song? The poet compares autumn with the other seasons. Stubble plains, the stubbles of the harvested crop. Thou is used for autumn, thy music too. Autumn also has its own song, according to the Keats. Bloom, land a glow of hedge cricket, grasshoppers, and redbreast is robin bird. Croft is a small piece of enclosed land. Garden croft, garden enclosure. Twitter is chirping of birds. In this concluding stanza, the poet says that autumn is not devoid of songs. It has its own music. As the spring is full of sweet songs, in the same way, there are sweet songs to be heard in autumn too. The songs of autumn are so sweet. The songs of autumn are introduced in scenes of sunset glory, the beauty of the sky, the escapes many did not escape Keats. But the sunset illuminates the earth as well as the sky and touches the stubble plains with hue. In the background of such a beautiful sunset, a wailful buzz of the swarming gnats, verifying with the force of the breeze, as the insects themselves rise and fall in the air. The familiar bleating of the full grown lambs on the hilly pond and chirping songs of grasshoppers, the whistling trembler of red Robin Hood, and finally the twittering swallows appear as delightful and sweet as the songs of springs. According to the poet, autumn herself, physically implying that autumn is mourning the loss of spring and considers herself at odds with her far more beautiful counterpart. Autumn is just as beautiful as spring is, and perhaps even more so. He slows this by dividing again into gorgeous imagery describing the sun setting over the land, the settled land, and the insects that come out at night, the animals that were born in springtime and are now full grown, and the birds that one can find in autumn. However, as with all of Keats' poems, that melancholy shows up again in the last stanza, as Keats' use of words such as soft dying and rosy implies a bloody end, despite his best allusions to the contrary. Throughout the poem, Keats alludes to the pastoral tradition in poetry, a form of poetic writing that celebrates the idea of countryside and focuses primarily on the description of the surroundings. Although one of the simplest of Keats' poems and one of the quietest in terms of plot, it remains one of his most lauded works. Although nothing much happened in it, the beauty of Keats' language and the skill of his mastery show that Keats' talent was really just beginning at the time of his death. This is one of the extraordinary poems by John Keats that reminds us of the best things of autumn or fall if you prefer you fall in American English. Thank thank you very much. This is all in this video. Thanks. If you feel any difficulty in understanding Keats, you are free to ask any question, any query. Thank you very much.